Some of the galaxy's most powerful figures cast large shadows from humble beginnings. But what happens when darkness isn't just a shadow, but the very foundation of power? Before he commanded star destroyers, before he ruled as emperor, before billions trembled at his name, there was simply a boy from Naboo, Sheev Palpatine. Born 84 years before the Battle of Yavin on the mid-rim planet of Naboo, Sheev Palpatine entered a galaxy still enjoying relative peace. The Republic stood strong, democracy flourished, and the Jedi Order protected the innocent. The Palpatine family belonged to Naboo's affluent noble class, affording young Sheev privileges most beings across the galaxy could only dream about. Yet even with advantages of birth and wealth, nothing about his early years suggested the galaxy-spanning terror he would one day unleash. Raised in Theed, Naboo's cultured capital city, Palpatine grew up surrounded by elegant architecture, refined society, and political discourse. The Naboo valued artistic pursuits and intellectual development, influences that shaped the young man's understanding of people and power. While other children played, Palpatine studied. While others formed friendships, he formed connections with politicians and social elites. These weren't just childhood acquaintances, they were the first strands in a web of influence he would spend decades weaving. From an early age, Palpatine displayed an uncanny ability to manipulate those around him. He could sense weaknesses, exploit insecurities, and bend conversations to his advantage. These weren't the clumsy attempts of a child testing boundaries. They showed a mind naturally attuned to the subtle arts of control. People who knew him then might have called him ambitious. None could have guessed just how far that ambition would reach. As a young man, Palpatine developed a fascination with artifacts connected to the dark side of the Force. He traveled extensively throughout the galaxy, building a collection that uninformed docents might have dismissed as worthless junk. But Palpatine knew better. Each relic, each ancient text, each forbidden sculpture was another piece of knowledge to be absorbed and eventually weaponized. These journeys taught him tactics for spreading power that would prove devastatingly effective in the decades to come. But the true turning point in Palpatine's life came when he encountered a mysterious figure known as Darth Plagueis the Wise. A dark lord of the Sith, Plagueis saw something in the young Naboo noble that others missed. Raw potential for darkness that exceeded anything he had seen before. Taking Palpatine as his apprentice, Plagueis bestowed upon him the Sith name Darth Sidious and began training him in the ways of the dark side of the Force. Their relationship followed the tradition first established by the ancient Darth Bane, the rule of two. This doctrine held that there should be only two Sith at any time, a master to embody power and an apprentice to crave it. For years, master and apprentice worked together in absolute secrecy, hidden from the watchful eyes of the Jedi Order, who believed the Sith had been extinct for a millennium. Under Plagueis, Sidious learned everything about the Force, especially the nature of the dark side. His master taught him abilities many would consider unnatural, ways to manipulate life, death, and the very fabric of reality. Plagueis himself had become obsessed with immortality, conducting experiments to manipulate midi-chlorians, the microscopic life forms that connect living beings to the Force, in an attempt to create life itself. These weren't merely academic pursuits. Plagueis believed he had discovered a pathway to immortality through a technique called transference, the ability to move consciousness from one body to another. The pair worked together for years, trying to unlock these secrets of immortality. Through science and forbidden Sith knowledge, they pushed boundaries that had remained untouched for generations. But even as they collaborated, Sidious harbored the inevitable thoughts that all Sith apprentices must entertain. The rule of two wasn't just a limitation, it was a promise. Eventually, the apprentice must challenge the master. Eventually, power must change hands. That moment came after Sidious had learned all he could from Plagueis. One night, when his master had fallen into a deep sleep, confident in his apprentice's loyalty, Sidious struck. The details of that betrayal remained shrouded in darkness, but the outcome was clear. Plagueis, for all his power and knowledge, for all his research into cheating death, died at the hands of his student. Sidious later reflected with particular fondness on this moment when he first realized he had surpassed his teacher and claimed the title of Master for himself. Now the Master rather than the apprentice, Sidious sought someone to train in the dark arts. His attention turned to Dathomir, home of the Force-wielding Night Sisters. There he approached their leader, Mother Talzin, initially considering her as a potential apprentice. He intermingled his knowledge of the dark side with her Night Sister magics, promising her power beyond imagination. But Sidious had never intended to honor this arrangement. Instead, his gaze fell upon Talzin's infant son, a Zabrak Night Brother who showed tremendous potential in the Force. Sidious ordered Talzin to surrender the child, threatening to abandon his promise to make her his apprentice if she refused. Reluctantly, she agreed, though it planted seeds of vengeance that would smolder for decades. The young Zabrak, who would become Darth Maul, was taken from his mother before he could even say goodbye. Sidious was particularly drawn to the child for his inability to control his anger, a trait that could be molded into a weapon of terrifying efficiency. Under Sidious's brutal training regimen, Maul was shaped into a living embodiment of Sith rage, a weapon to be wielded against the Jedi when the time was right. The training was merciless. Sidious once brought Maul to the dead world of Malachor to witness the aftermath of an ancient battle between Jedi and Sith. There, he forced his apprentice to breathe in the ashes of slain Sith warriors, triggering visions of their deaths at Jedi hands. Through this cruel exercise, Sidious instilled in Maul a burning hatred for the Jedi Order and a desperate need for revenge, emotions that would fuel his apprentice's power in the dark side. For many years, Maul trained in absolute secrecy. Sidious kept him hidden away, a shadow weapon being honed to lethal sharpness. The young Zabrak grew into a fearsome warrior whose entire existence was devoted to serving his master's grand plans. Yet even as he trained Maul, Sidious was looking beyond him, already plotting the eventual betrayal that all Sith masters must eventually contemplate. All the while, Sidious maintained his public persona as Sheev Palpatine of Naboo, a mild-mannered politician rising through the ranks of the Galactic Republic. None who encountered him in the Senate halls would have guessed that behind his pleasant smile lurked the most dangerous Sith Lord in 1,000 years. This perfect compartmentalization, the ability to be both Palpatine and Sidious without either identity contaminating the other, showcased the psychological mastery that made him truly dangerous. From these beginnings, a privileged youth on a peaceful world, twisted by ambition and dark knowledge, arose the figure who would one day rule the galaxy with an iron fist. The seeds of tyranny were planted early, watered with betrayal, and fertilized with patience. Palpatine was playing a long game, one that would extend across decades and cost billions of lives. And as he moved his first pieces onto the galactic chessboard, not even the wisest Jedi Masters could sense the darkness gathering at the edge of their perception. The most dangerous predator never announces itself. In the political wilderness of the Galactic Republic, one man mastered the art of invisibility while hiding in plain sight. As Senator Palpatine smiled and shook hands in brightly lit corridors of power, Darth Sidious lurked in shadows, orchestrating the downfall of an entire system of government. This perfect compartmentalization would become his greatest weapon. By 52 BBY, Palpatine had secured election as senator for Naboo and the entire Chomel sector. This position gave him authority over 36 planets in the Galactic Republic Senate. To the public, he appeared as nothing more than an ambitious politician from a peaceful mid-rim world. His colleagues saw a soft-spoken, thoughtful representative who quickly joined Chancellor Skor Kalpana's ruling party. Few noticed how rapidly he accumulated influence, or how carefully he studied the Republic's weaknesses. While representing his homeworld, Palpatine maintained a faithful correspondence with promising military minds like Wilhuf Tarkin. He supported bills that would benefit Tarkin's homeworld of Eriadu and the Seswena sector, building loyalty that would serve him for decades to come. During their rare face-to-face meetings, Palpatine would speak of disturbing trends in the Outer Rim, warning that something dangerous was brewing that might have galactic repercussions. Beyond these visible alliances, rumors swirled about Palpatine's mysterious supporters. Political enemies speculated about shadowy organizations and figures working outside the public eye. Some whispered of connections to industrialists, financiers, and bankers from major galactic sectors. None could prove these connections existed, yet Palpatine's influence continued to grow beyond what his position should have allowed. While Senator Palpatine built political capital within the system, Darth Sidious worked to undermine that same system from without. His first major target was the Trade Federation, a powerful commerce guild with its own military forces. Through manipulation and threats, Sidious gained control over Viceroy Newt Gunray, effectively turning the Federation into his personal pawn. Under his direction, the Trade Federation constructed a massive droid army manufactured by Geonosian foundries controlled by Poggle the Lesser, another pawn in Sidious's growing collection. The Trade Federation provided the perfect instrument for Sidious' first major gambit. For years, he had maneuvered the Senate into battles over taxation laws, carefully ensuring neither side gained permanent advantage. These conflicts kept the Republic distracted and weakened Chancellor Valorum's position. When taxation of trade routes in outlying systems became a flashpoint issue, Sidious saw his opportunity. In a masterful display of puppeteering, Sidious convinced the Trade Federation to blockade his own homeworld of Naboo, supposedly in protest of the taxation laws. The Federation leadership, particularly the nervous Newt Gunray, followed his commands without understanding they were merely tools in a larger scheme. When Gunray questioned the legality of such an action, Sidious simply assured him that he would make it legal. His plan was so carefully constructed that even as Senator Palpatine publicly fought against the blockade, Darth Sidious was directing its every move. The Republic responded predictably. Chancellor Valorum, hoping to resolve the crisis peacefully, secretly dispatched 2 Jedi ambassadors to negotiate with the Trade Federation. This too played directly into Sidious's hands. He ordered Gunray to assassinate the Jedi and escalate from blockade to full invasion. Though the Jedi escaped, Naboo fell under occupation, creating exactly the political crisis Sidious had envisioned. As Naboo suffered, Senator Palpatine positioned himself as a sympathetic figure on Coruscant. When Queen Amidala escaped the occupation and traveled to the capital to plead her case, Palpatine was waiting. In a calculated performance, he presented himself as a concerned mentor, explaining that corruption had rendered the Senate ineffective. Chancellor Valorum, he suggested, was too weak to help her world. When Amidala appeared before the Senate, Palpatine had already planted the seed that would bloom into his ascension. The Senate session played out exactly as he had orchestrated. Valorum, bound by procedure and bureaucracy, could offer no immediate relief to Naboo. Frustrated and desperate, Queen Amidala followed Palpatine's whispered advice and called for a vote of no confidence in Valorum's leadership. Within moments, hundreds of senators were demanding an immediate vote, leaving the Chancellor stunned at this sudden betrayal. The political vacuum created the perfect opportunity for Palpatine to put himself forward as a candidate for Supreme Chancellor, alongside Bail Antilles of Alderaan and Ainley Team of Malastare. His status as representative of the victimized world of Naboo gave him a sympathetic edge that his opponents could not match. While the Senate debated, Queen Amidala returned to Naboo, determined to end the occupation herself. What followed was another layer of Sidious's complex plan. As the Queen and her Jedi protectors fought to liberate Naboo, Darth Maul emerged from the shadows to confront them. This was the first time the Jedi had faced a Sith Lord in 1,000 years, a shock that rippled through their order. Though Maul succeeded in killing Jedi Master Qui-Gon Jinn, he himself fell to Qui-Gon's apprentice, Obi-Wan Kenobi. The loss of Maul might have seemed a setback, but Sidious had already identified a more valuable potential apprentice. During the Naboo crisis, young Anakin Skywalker had been discovered by the Jedi. Tests revealed him to have the highest midichlorian count ever recorded, suggesting he might be the prophesied chosen one destined to bring balance to the Force. Sidious immediately recognized Skywalker as a far more valuable long-term asset than Maul had ever been. Back on Coruscant, events continued to unfold in Sidious's favor. As Naboo celebrated its liberation, the Senate elected Palpatine as the new Supreme Chancellor. During the victory parade on Naboo, Chancellor Palpatine personally congratulated young Skywalker, telling him that his career would be watched with great interest. Those present saw only a kindly leader encouraging a brave child. None recognized the moment for what it truly was, a predator marking its future prey. The death of Darth Maul necessitated finding a new apprentice to maintain the rule of two. Sidious turned to Count Dooku, a former Jedi Master who had become disillusioned with the Republic and the Jedi Order. Following the death of his former Padawan Qui-Gon Jinn on Naboo, Dooku left the Jedi Order to reclaim his title as Count of Sereno. Sidious recruited him by exploiting his anger with the Republic, bestowing upon him the Sith name Darth Tyrannus. Their alliance quickly bore fruit. Under Sidious's direction, Dooku eliminated Jedi Master Sifo Dyas and took over his project. A massive clone army being produced on the distant world of Kamino. To cover his tracks, Dooku erased all records of Kamino from the Jedi archives. This army would eventually serve as another critical piece in Sidious's grand strategy. From humble beginnings as a senator from a mid-rim world, Palpatine had now ascended to the highest office in the Republic. With control of both the Senate floor and the shadowy realm of the Sith, he was perfectly positioned to execute the next phase of his plan, the engineered collapse of the Republic itself, all while appearing to be its greatest defender. The death of one apprentice, the recruitment of another, and the identification of his ultimate successor. These were not failures or course corrections, but simply the natural evolution of a plan unfathomably deeper and more patient than anyone could have suspected. As the galaxy celebrated the resolution of the Naboo crisis, none realized that the Phantom Menace had not been defeated. It had won completely and now sat in the Chancellor's office, smiling at its own victory. The most brilliant chess players think a dozen moves ahead. Palpatine thought in decades. While the galaxy focused on daily struggles, he orchestrated a conflict so vast that billions would die without ever understanding their role in his grand design. From his office on Coruscant, Chancellor Palpatine would unleash the Clone Wars, a galaxy-spanning conflict with both sides secretly dancing to the same puppet master. With Count Dooku now serving as his apprentice Darth Tyrannus, Sidious set about creating the perfect enemy for the Republic. Under his direction, Dooku rallied thousands of star systems to declare their independence, forming the Confederacy of Independent Systems. This separatist movement played on legitimate grievances many worlds held against the Republic, from corruption to neglect of the Outer Rim. Few suspected that the charismatic Count, who spoke of freedom from Republic overreach, was himself a Sith Lord working to destroy both systems from within. The true genius of the plan lay in its foundation. Years earlier, the now-deceased Jedi Master Sifo Dyas had foreseen coming conflict and commissioned a clone army on Kamino. After Dooku murdered Sifo Dyas, he and Sidious seized control of the project, selecting the bounty hunter Jango Fett as the genetic template for the clones. But they added a crucial modification unknown to the Kaminoan cloners or the Jedi. Every clone trooper received a behavioral modification biochip during development. These chips contained Protocol 66, a hidden command that would, when activated, override the clones' normal thought processes and force them to turn against the Jedi, viewing them as traitors to be eliminated without question. This failsafe would remain dormant for years, an army of sleeper agents hiding in plain sight as loyal Republic soldiers. As the separatist movement grew, Palpatine showed the political brilliance that had brought him to power. In public, he played the role of a reluctant wartime leader, expressing regret at the fracturing Republic and calling for peaceful resolutions. Behind closed doors, Darth Sidious met with separatist leaders, directing their strategy and ensuring the conflict would escalate exactly as he planned. The crisis came to a head when the Jedi discovered the clone army on Kamino, coincidentally just as they learned of a massive droid army being built by the separatists on Geonosis. When the Jedi attempted to intervene, they were captured, creating the perfect opportunity for the Senate to grant Palpatine emergency powers. His first act with this new authority was to approve the use of the clone army, beginning what would become known as the Clone Wars. The resulting conflict was deliberately engineered to be devastating and protracted. As Chancellor, Palpatine appeared troubled by the violence while secretly extending and expanding it at every turn. Each Republic victory was balanced by a separatist breakthrough elsewhere. Military leaders who might have ended the conflict too quickly were undermined or eliminated. The war became a meat grinder, consuming resources and lives while exhausting the Republic both militarily and spiritually. Throughout the 3 years of the Clone Wars, Palpatine methodically accumulated more emergency powers, always under the guise of necessity. Each amendment to the Galactic Constitution was presented as a temporary measure to address the crisis, but the combined effect was to systematically dismantle the checks and balances that had limited executive power for 1,000 generations. The Senate, once the beating heart of Republic democracy, became increasingly irrelevant as Palpatine centralized authority in his office. Regional governors were appointed to oversee strategic areas, bypassing the traditional planetary representation system. Military decisions were removed from Senate oversight, with Palpatine citing security concerns. Even the Jedi Order, traditionally independent from political control, found themselves serving as generals in the Republic Army, subject to the Supreme Chancellor's command structure. The institutions that might have resisted the rise of autocracy were weakened, co-opted, or discredited. While orchestrating the war on a galactic scale, Palpatine never lost sight of his most important long-term project, Anakin Skywalker. The young Jedi represented something special, a vergence in the Force with potential power beyond anything the Sith or Jedi had wielded before. Converting him to the dark side would require patience and precision. Palpatine cultivated a relationship with Skywalker that was unique among the Jedi. Unlike the formal interactions he maintained with the Jedi Council, his meetings with Anakin were warm and personal. He positioned himself as a mentor and confidant, someone who recognized Anakin's exceptional talents when the Jedi seemed to take them for granted. During training sessions at the Jedi Temple, Palpatine would attend specifically to watch Skywalker's progress, expressing appreciation for his growing skills in lightsaber combat. These gestures created a bond of trust that Palpatine expertly exploited. When Anakin felt frustrated by Jedi constraints, Palpatine would subtly suggest the Order failed to recognize his true potential. When the young Jedi struggled with his emotions, particularly his attachments, Palpatine offered understanding rather than the detachment counseled by Jedi teachings. Each conversation planted seeds of doubt about Jedi wisdom, while positioning Palpatine as the one person who truly believed in Anakin's destiny. On countless occasions, Palpatine told Skywalker he was the most gifted Jedi he had ever encountered. He predicted Anakin would become more powerful than any Jedi, even Master Yoda. These flattering words fed Anakin's pride and sense of exceptionalism, creating an ideal environment for the darker emotions that would eventually consume him. All the while, Palpatine encouraged Skywalker to trust his feelings rather than Jedi teachings, knowing these feelings would eventually lead to fear, anger, and the dark side. As the Clone Wars approached their final phase, Palpatine recognized the time had come to accelerate his plans. The galaxy was exhausted by conflict. The Jedi were spread thin across countless battlefronts, and Anakin Skywalker had grown into a powerful but emotionally vulnerable Jedi Knight. The stage was set for the final act of his decades-long performance. With meticulous precision, Sidious arranged his own kidnapping by General Grievous, the cyborg supreme commander of the Separatist forces. Using secret hyperspace routes, Grievous led a massive Separatist fleet in a surprise attack on Coruscant itself. During the chaos, Grievous captured Chancellor Palpatine exactly as instructed, bringing him aboard his flagship, the Invisible Hand. This audacious gambit served multiple purposes. It created a crisis that would justify even greater emergency powers once resolved. It positioned Palpatine as a vulnerable victim rather than a mastermind. Most importantly, it created the perfect scenario to bring Anakin Skywalker one step closer to the dark side. When Jedi Masters Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker rescued the Chancellor from Grievous' ship, they encountered Count Dooku in the ship's observation deck. The resulting lightsaber duel was another piece of Sidious' grand design. Dooku disabled Kenobi, leaving Skywalker to face him alone. When Anakin gained the upper hand and disarmed Dooku, literally severing both his hands, the stage was set for a critical moment in Skywalker's fall. Chancellor Palpatine, bound to a chair as the supposed captive, urged Anakin to kill the helpless Dooku. This act violated the Jedi Code, which prohibited killing an unarmed opponent. When Skywalker hesitated, Palpatine pressed him, and Anakin ultimately beheaded the Count. The Chancellor immediately praised the action, while simultaneously noting it wasn't the Jedi way, planting another seed of confusion in Skywalker's moral compass. What Anakin could not know was that this moment had been planned by Sidious long in advance. Dooku himself never realized he had been set up for execution. The Sith Lord had served his purpose in creating and leading the Separatist movement. Now, with the war nearing its conclusion, Sidious needed him eliminated to tie up loose ends and push Skywalker further down the path to darkness. The brilliance of Sidious' strategy lay in its multidimensional nature. While galactic events unfolded as he designed, each development served multiple goals simultaneously. The Clone Wars weakened the Republic, empowered the Chancellor, exhausted the Jedi, created the infrastructure of what would become the Empire, and provided the perfect environment to corrupt Anakin Skywalker. It was a tapestry of manipulation woven so skillfully that even his enemies could not see the pattern until it was too late. As the galaxy burned in conflict, few recognized that the true war was not between Republic and Separatists, but between freedom and tyranny, between light and the encroaching darkness. And in that war, fought in the shadows of Senate committees and behind the propaganda of patriotic speeches, Darth Sidious was winning decisively. The Republic was dying, not from external threats, but from a cancer growing at its very heart. The greatest victories sometimes require the most personal betrayals. As the Clone Wars reached their final days, Chancellor Palpatine prepared to spring a trap 3 decades in the making. The Republic stood exhausted, the Jedi were scattered across the stars, and one young knight struggled with nightmares that would soon tear his world apart. Anakin Skywalker found himself plagued by terrifying visions. Night after night, he witnessed his pregnant wife Padme dying in childbirth. These weren't mere dreams, but false premonitions, similar to those he'd experienced before his mother's death. The fear of losing Padme consumed him, made worse by the knowledge that their marriage violated the Jedi Code. He could not seek help from the Order without revealing his forbidden attachment. Palpatine, ever the patient hunter, recognized the perfect moment to strike. He had spent years cultivating Skywalker's trust, positioning himself as a father figure and mentor. Now he would exploit that trust completely. During an opera performance attended by both men, Palpatine shared the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, a Sith Lord so powerful he could manipulate midi-chlorians to create life and prevent those he cared about from dying. The bait was set perfectly. Anakin, desperate to save his wife, was drawn to the possibility of such power. Palpatine carefully noted the young Jedi's interest before revealing that such abilities could not be learned from the Jedi. The seed was planted. Anakin now knew there might be a way to save Padme, but only through forbidden knowledge. Days later, Palpatine took the final step. During a private conversation in his office, he revealed his true identity to Anakin, admitting he was trained in the ways of the Force, including the nature of the dark side. This calculated disclosure forced Anakin into an impossible position. As a Jedi, his duty was clear. He should report the Sith Lord to the Council immediately. But doing so might cost him his only chance to save Padme. Torn between duty and desperation, Anakin reported Palpatine to Jedi Master Mace Windu. The revered Jedi assembled a team of Masters to arrest the Chancellor. But even as they moved against Palpatine, Anakin's resolve crumbled. The thought of losing the only person who might save Padme became unbearable. He rushed to the Chancellor's office, arriving just as Windu seemed to gain the upper hand against Sidious. The scene that greeted him was shocking. The kindly Chancellor he knew appeared defenseless, cowering before Windu's lightsaber. When Sidious attempted to defend himself with Force lightning, Windu deflected it back, causing severe disfigurement to Palpatine's face. The Dark Lord, now revealed in his true hideous form, pleaded weakly for help, claiming he could no longer maintain his defense. Windu declared Palpatine too dangerous to be kept alive, raising his lightsaber for the killing blow. In that crucial moment, Anakin made his choice. He severed Windu's hand, allowing Palpatine to unleash a full barrage of Force lightning that sent the Jedi Master plummeting to his death from the office window. With this act, Anakin Skywalker fell to the dark side. Recognizing the enormity of his actions, Anakin sank to his knees in despair. Palpatine seized this moment of weakness, offering the distraught Jedi a place at his side. Desperate for a path forward and believing the dark side was now his only hope to save Padme, Anakin pledged himself to the Sith Lord's teachings. Palpatine bestowed upon him a new name, Darth Vader. The transformation was swift and brutal. Palpatine immediately commanded his new apprentice to lead the 501st Legion, an elite clone unit, in an attack on the Jedi Temple. The newly christened Darth Vader obeyed without question, marching up the temple steps with hundreds of clone troopers behind him. What followed was nothing short of massacre. Jedi Masters, Knights, Padawans, and even younglings fell to Vader's lightsaber and the clone blasters. No one was spared. Simultaneously, across the galaxy, Palpatine initiated Order 66. Through secure communication channels, he contacted clone commanders on every battlefront. With the simple phrase, "Execute Order 66, he activated the behavioral modification biochips implanted in each clone trooper. The effect was immediate and devastating. Clone troopers who had served faithfully alongside their Jedi generals for years suddenly turned their weapons on them without hesitation or remorse. On Magito, Master Ki-Adi-Mundi was gunned down mid-charge by Commander Bakara and the Galactic Marines. On Felucia, Aayla Secura fell to Commander Bly's repeated blaster shots. On Cato Nemoidia, Plo Koon's starfighter was shot down by his own wingmen. Even the legendary Master Yoda felt the disturbance in the Force as his clone troopers prepared to betray him, allowing him the split second needed to escape. In a single coordinated strike, thousands of Jedi were eliminated. An order that had stood for over 1,000 generations was reduced to a handful of survivors in minutes. The great Jedi Purge had begun, and the galaxy was forever changed. With the Jedi Temple in flames and the Order decimated, Palpatine moved to secure his political victory. He called an emergency session of the Senate, his face now severely disfigured from his confrontation with Windu. Far from hiding these scars, he used them as powerful visual evidence for his narrative. Standing before the assembled senators, Palpatine claimed he had been brutally attacked by Jedi traitors attempting to overthrow the government. He assured the Senate that the rebellion had been foiled, that loyalist clone troopers had shut down the Jedi insurrection. Any remaining Jedi, he declared, would be hunted down and defeated. Then came the moment that marked the official end of the Republic. With calculated dramatic flair, Palpatine announced that to ensure security and continuing stability, the Republic would be reorganized into the First Galactic Empire, with himself as Emperor. Rather than resist this blatant power grab, the Senate erupted in thunderous applause. Democracy died not through conquest, but with enthusiastic approval, just as Palpatine had engineered. The beings who should have been the last line of defense against tyranny instead embraced it, exhausted by war and seduced by promises of safety and order. Meanwhile, Palpatine had dispatched Vader to Mustafar to eliminate the remaining separatist leaders. This mission served multiple purposes. It tied up loose ends, removing anyone who knew of Sidious' connection to the separatist movement. It further corrupted Vader through more killing, and it positioned him for a confrontation that would complete his transformation. When Padme traced Vader to Mustafar, she was horrified by the changes in her husband. Obi-Wan Kenobi, having discovered Anakin's fall to the dark side, had stowed away aboard her ship. Upon seeing his former master, Vader succumbed to rage, believing Padme had betrayed him. He force-choked his pregnant wife, leaving her unconscious, before engaging Obi-Wan in a vicious lightsaber duel among the lava flows. The battle ended in tragedy for Vader. Outmaneuvered by his former master, he suffered the loss of his remaining organic limbs and caught fire on the banks of a lava river, suffering horrific burns across his entire body. Obi-Wan, unable to deliver a killing blow to his former friend, left him for dead. But Sidious had monitored the situation, sensing his apprentice was in danger. He arrived on Mustafar with a medical capsule and a team of clone troopers, retrieving Vader's charred form from the volcanic shore. The injured Sith apprentice was transported to a medical facility on Coruscant for emergency surgery. What followed was a painful rebirth. A team of medical droids and cybernetic specialists worked through the night to save Vader's life. Limbs were replaced with mechanical prosthetics. Burned lungs were supported by an advanced breathing apparatus. A suit of black armor was constructed to protect his weakened body and intimidate his enemies. Vader remained conscious throughout much of this excruciating procedure, his pain feeding his connection to the dark side. When the surgery was complete, Sidious approached his reconstructed apprentice. Vader's first question was about Padme. In perhaps his most calculated cruelty, Sidious told Vader that in his anger he had killed his wife. This was a deliberate lie. Padme had died after delivering twins, her life force seemingly fading as her will to live disappeared. But the lie served Sidious perfectly. It completed Vader's fall, transforming his grief into rage and binding him more tightly to his master. In his anguish, Vader lashed out with the Force, destroying medical droids and equipment. He broke free from the operating table and screamed his despair to the galaxy. Sidious observed this display with satisfaction. Through manipulation, deception, and exploitation of Anakin Skywalker's deepest fears, he had transformed the Chosen One into his perfect enforcer. The transition from Republic to Empire was complete. Palpatine now ruled as Emperor, with his apprentice Darth Vader at his side. The Jedi Order was destroyed, its survivors scattered and hunted. The clone army, once defenders of the Republic, now served as stormtroopers enforcing Imperial will. Democratic institutions had been replaced by regional governors loyal to the throne. 1,000 years of civilization had been dismantled in days, and few had even recognized it was happening until it was too late. For Darth Sidious, it was the culmination of a plan generations in the making. The Sith had their revenge, the dark side reigned supreme, and the galaxy entered its darkest hour. Ultimate power rarely satisfies those who achieve it. For Emperor Palpatine, conquering the galaxy was merely the first step in a much grander ambition. As worlds fell under the shadow of his new order, Palpatine turned his gaze beyond conventional authority to pursuits that would have terrified even his most loyal subjects had they known. The former Jedi Temple on Coruscant became the Emperor's personal residence, a symbolic conquest over his ancient enemies. But this choice wasn't merely about symbolism. The Jedi had built their sacred headquarters atop an ancient Sith shrine, attempting to neutralize and cap the dark power that sprang from its depths. Using droids supervised by his protocol droid 11-4D, inherited from Darth Plagueis, Palpatine ordered the shrine reopened and restored. The dark energy that had been contained for millennia now flowed freely, empowering the Emperor while corrupting the once sacred halls above. With the Jedi nearly exterminated, Palpatine still faced the problem of survivors scattered across the galaxy. The solution came in the form of the Inquisitorius, an organization of dark side adepts tasked with hunting down remaining Jedi. Most Inquisitors were themselves former Jedi who had been captured and subjected to torture until they turned to the dark side. The Grand Inquisitor, a former Jedi Temple guard, joined voluntarily, as did the fifth brother. These fallen Jedi now served the very empire they once would have opposed, wielding red lightsabers and tracking their former comrades with ruthless efficiency. For those who showed potential but resisted conversion, Palpatine was prepared to take more extreme measures. When the Inquisitors captured former Jedi librarian Jocasta Nu, Palpatine ordered his apprentice Vader to secure her vast knowledge of Force secrets and artifacts, along with her records of Force-sensitive children across the galaxy. Once this information was extracted, she was eliminated, her extensive knowledge absorbed into the Emperor's growing collection of forbidden lore. The day-to-day governance of his vast empire increasingly bored the Emperor. While he had spent decades meticulously acquiring political power, the bureaucratic tedium of ruling held little interest compared to his true obsession. Palpatine delegated most administrative functions to subordinates, while he devoted himself to studying Sith arcana and probing the secrets of the dark side. His goal transcended mere political authority. He sought the ultimate power, immortality. This fixation wasn't new. Learning the secret of eternal life had been the obsession of his master, Darth Plagueis, and Palpatine had absorbed this ambition. But where Plagueis had failed, Palpatine was determined to succeed. His private chambers filled with ancient Sith texts and artifacts. He conducted experiments that would have horrified even his most hardened military commanders, all in pursuit of the power to cheat death itself. The quest led him to Exegol, a hidden world in the unknown regions steeped in dark side energy. There, in a massive Sith citadel, he established a secret base of operations beyond the knowledge of all but his most trusted servants. The planet became home to the Sith Eternal, a cult of loyalists devoted to Sith traditions and Palpatine personally. Under his direction, they began experiments combining ancient Sith alchemy with advanced cloning technology, seeking methods to create suitable vessels for transferring consciousness. While keeping the Imperial Senate as a vestigial organ of government, Palpatine recognized the need for more direct methods of control. He committed vast resources to the development of the Death Star, a moon-sized battle station capable of destroying entire planets. This superweapon would become the ultimate expression of his doctrine of rule through fear. Once completed, it would eliminate the need for political pretense altogether. Systems would fall in line not because of senatorial debate, but because of the ever-present threat of annihilation. The Death Star represented just one facet of Palpatine's technological ambitions. Throughout his reign, he dispatched explorers to unmapped regions of space, searching for the source of the dark side he believed lay hidden there. These expeditions built communication stations and research laboratories on distant moons and asteroids, extending Imperial influence into territories previously considered unreachable. These remote facilities served another, more personal purpose. They formed part of what Palpatine called the contingency, a complex plan that would activate in the event of his death. Imperial scouts extensively explored the unknown regions, while massive resources were diverted to seed shipyards, observatories, and laboratories in these distant territories. The arrangement continued over decades, known only to Palpatine and a select few chosen servants. One such servant was Gallius Rax, an orphan Palpatine discovered on the frontier world of Jakku. After finding the boy stowed away on his personal starship, the Imperialis, Palpatine gave him a choice between death and service. Choosing to live, the boy was tasked with guarding an excavation site on Jakku that held special significance to the Emperor. Years later, Palpatine inducted Rax into Imperial service and entrusted him with crucial aspects of the contingency, ensuring that should Palpatine ever die prematurely, the Empire would not be allowed to outlive its Emperor. The Emperor's pursuit of power extended even to the recruitment of exceptional individuals who showed unique abilities. When Captain Vos Park discovered a Chiss named Thrawn in wild space, Palpatine personally interviewed the alien strategist. Recognizing Thrawn's military genius and knowledge of the unknown regions, Palpatine brought him into Imperial service. During a private conversation in his garden, the Emperor revealed his long-standing interest in the unknown regions to Thrawn, establishing an alliance that would serve both their interests. As years passed, Palpatine retreated further from public view. Official appearances became increasingly rare. Many citizens went their entire lives seeing the Emperor only in propaganda hollows. This withdrawal wasn't merely about security or convenience. The deeper Palpatine delved into dark side mysteries, the more his physical form paid the price. His already disfigured appearance deteriorated further, his body becoming a vessel for energies that corrupted living tissue. This physical decline did nothing to diminish his iron grip on power. If anything, his control tightened as his bodily presence faded. He ruled through fear, using Vader as his visible enforcer while he orchestrated events from the shadows. Regional governors known as Moffs and Grand Moffs implemented his will across the stars, their authority backed by an ever-growing military machine. When resistance inevitably emerged, Palpatine responded with calculated brutality. The subjugation of Mon Cala demonstrated his approach. When signs indicated a Jedi might be advising King Li Cha, Palpatine dispatched Vader and the Inquisitorius to the Ocean World, along with a military task force under Grand Moff Tarkin. The resulting occupation crushed resistance and turned the peaceful Mon Calamari into Imperial slaves, their engineering genius now forced to serve the Imperial fleet. Throughout these operations, Palpatine maintained a delicate balance with his apprentice. Vader's power continued to grow, as did his effectiveness as the Emperor's enforcer. Yet Palpatine never fully trusted him, regularly testing his loyalty and setting him against potential rivals. When Dr. Silo presented cybernetically enhanced warriors as possible replacements for Vader, Palpatine allowed the competition, forcing his apprentice to prove his superior worth through combat and cunning. These machinations served a dual purpose. They kept Vader sharp, preventing complacency that might lead to thoughts of overthrowing his master. They also ensured that should Vader ever fail or rebel, replacements stood ready. Though none of these alternatives ultimately proved Vader's equal, their existence reinforced a crucial message. Everyone, even the dreaded Darth Vader, was expendable in the Emperor's grand design. The true extent of Palpatine's dark side research remained hidden even from Vader. His ultimate goal went beyond conventional notions of political control or even Sith dominance. Palpatine sought nothing less than the power to reshape reality itself. Beyond simple immortality, he wanted absolute command over the Force, the ability to bend the very fabric of existence to his will and bring every living being under his dark control. The Death Star was merely a stepping stone, designed to become the symbol of fear that would keep the galaxy in line, while he and Vader pursued deeper secrets of the dark side. As the years passed, what had begun as the New Order calcified into a regime of oppression unmatched in galactic history. Slavery returned to worlds where it had been abolished for centuries. Non-human species faced systematic discrimination. Cultural treasures were looted, traditional governance structures dismantled, and entire populations displaced to serve imperial industry. The darkness that had begun in Palpatine's heart now engulfed thousands of worlds, billions of lives existing in shadow, while he pursued powers beyond mortal comprehension. Through it all, most beings never glimpsed the true horror lurking behind the imperial facade. They saw only the uniformed officers, the marching stormtroopers, the star destroyers hanging in their skies. Few suspected that behind these visible manifestations of tyranny lurked something far worse. A ruler who viewed the entire galaxy as merely a stepping stone to godlike power, who saw its inhabitants not as subjects to govern, but as resources to consume in his quest for ultimate dominion over life, death, and the Force itself. Even the most carefully constructed plans can unravel with a single unexpected thread. For Emperor Palpatine, that thread was pulled by a farm boy from Tatooine who fired 2 proton torpedoes into an exhaust port, destroying the Death Star during the Battle of Yavin. In that explosive moment, decades of plotting faced their first serious challenge, and Palpatine found himself confronted with both crisis and opportunity. The Death Star had been more than a weapon. It represented the culmination of Palpatine's doctrine of rule through fear, the physical embodiment of imperial might that would allow him to finally dissolve the Senate and rule through direct military control. Its destruction at the hands of the Rebel Alliance was not merely a tactical setback, but a symbolic blow to the aura of imperial invincibility he had carefully cultivated. In the aftermath, Palpatine received reports identifying the pilot responsible for the Death Star's destruction, Luke Skywalker. The name immediately caught his attention. A Skywalker from Tatooine could be no coincidence. Further investigation confirmed what he began to suspect. This young rebel was the son of Darth Vader, hidden away after his birth and raised in obscurity. The discovery awakened something in Palpatine that few had ever witnessed: genuine interest in another being, not as a tool or a stepping stone, but as a potential successor. In Skywalker, Palpatine saw extraordinary potential, perhaps even greater than what he had seen in Anakin decades earlier. Here was a pilot with barely any training who had destroyed the Empire's greatest weapon through his connection to the Force. What might he become with proper Sith training? But before he could pursue this new apprentice, Palpatine needed to address more immediate concerns. The Death Star's destruction had created a ripple effect across the galaxy. Systems that had previously complied out of fear now questioned Imperial dominance. Pirate activity against supply convoys increased as the Empire no longer seemed invincible. Even loyal worlds like mining-rich Shu-Torun began to resist Imperial demands for higher resource tithes. Palpatine responded with calculated restructuring. He appointed General Cassio Tag as Grand General, with command over all military matters, recognizing Tag's foresight in arguing against relying solely on the Death Star. Vader, who had failed to protect the battle station, was demoted and ordered to serve under Tag, a public humiliation designed to test his loyalty and resolve. This demotion was just the beginning of Palpatine's renewed testing of Vader. The Sith Master had always planned to replace his damaged apprentice eventually, but now he accelerated these efforts. When approached by the scientist Dr. Silo, who had helped save Vader's life after Mustafar, Palpatine agreed to fund the creation of potential replacements. Silo's subjects combined genetic upgrades with cybernetic enhancements, designed to match Force users in combat without requiring connection to the Force itself. Among these potential replacements were the twins Iolin and Morit Astarte, the drone-controlling scientist Toulon Voidgazer, and Commander Carbon, a Mon Calamari veteran rebuilt in the style of General Grievous. Palpatine arranged for Vader and these subjects to fight, declaring that only one would win the position as his enforcer. This competition served multiple purposes. It pushed Vader to grow stronger through adversity, identified possible successors should Vader fail, and most importantly, kept his apprentice focused on survival rather than thoughts of overthrowing his master. While these power games unfolded, Palpatine continued gathering information about young Skywalker. The boy had been trained briefly by Obi-Wan Kenobi before the old Jedi's death at Vader's hands. Now he fought with the rebellion, his Force abilities growing despite his lack of formal training. Palpatine sensed a disturbance in the Force centered around Skywalker, a potential that both intrigued and concerned him. When Palpatine finally confirmed beyond doubt that Luke was Vader's son, he shared this information with his apprentice. Through a holographic communication to Vader aboard the Superstar Destroyer Executor, Palpatine revealed the identity of the pilot who destroyed the Death Star. This disclosure was carefully calculated. By allowing Vader to pursue his son, Palpatine set in motion the next phase of his plan. If Vader could turn Luke to the dark side, they would gain a powerful ally. If Luke killed Vader, he would be primed to take his father's place at Palpatine's side. What Palpatine could not fully anticipate was the effect this revelation would have on Vader himself. After nearly 2 decades of unquestioning service, the knowledge that his son lived reawakened something long buried in the Sith apprentice. Though outwardly loyal, Vader began harboring thoughts of overthrowing Palpatine and ruling the galaxy with Luke at his side. The Emperor's game had introduced an unexpected variable. Despite setbacks, Imperial military might continue to pursue the Rebel alliance across the galaxy. After a devastating defeat on the ice planet Hoth, the scattered rebels posed less immediate threat, allowing Palpatine to focus on a project he had initiated immediately after the first Death Star's destruction, a second, larger battle station with none of the vulnerabilities that had doomed its predecessor. Construction of this new Death Star proceeded in orbit around the forest moon of Endor, protected by a powerful shield generator on the moon's surface. As the station neared completion, Palpatine made an unusual decision. He would personally oversee the final phases of construction. More surprisingly, he allowed information about the Death Star's location to reach Rebel intelligence. This was no security failure, but a carefully crafted trap. Palpatine understood that the rebellion, desperate for a decisive victory, would commit everything to destroying the second Death Star. By making himself present, he added irresistible bait. The rebels would see an opportunity to eliminate both the Emperor and his superweapon in a single strike. What they could not know was that the station, while appearing incomplete, was already fully operational, its super laser ready to destroy any attacking fleet. The final piece of Palpatine's plan involved Luke Skywalker. Through Vader, he arranged for the young Jedi to be brought before him on the Death Star. When Skywalker finally stood in the Emperor's throne room, Palpatine revealed the full extent of his foresight and manipulation. The shield protecting the Death Star remained active, the Rebel fleet would be caught in a trap, and Skywalker would watch as his friends died before he either turned to the dark side or perished. In that darkened throne room, Palpatine subjected Luke to psychological warfare, refined through decades of manipulation. He praised the young Jedi's abilities while dismissing his attachment to the light side. He encouraged Luke to give in to his anger, particularly toward Vader. When Luke attempted to resist, Palpatine revealed that Vader and a legion of his best troops had captured Luke's friends on Endor. The Death Star then demonstrated its operational status by destroying a Rebel cruiser, adding despair to Luke's emotional turmoil. The culmination came when Luke, unable to maintain his composure, grabbed his lightsaber to strike down the Emperor. Vader intercepted the blow, and father and son began a fierce duel. Palpatine watched with growing satisfaction as Luke's anger intensified. When Vader discovered through the Force that Luke had a twin sister and threatened to turn her instead, Luke unleashed his fury, overpowering his father and cutting off his mechanical hand. This was the moment Palpatine had engineered. With Vader defeated and Luke vibrating with dark side energy, the Emperor urged him to take his father's place at his side. But in a move Palpatine had not anticipated, Luke regained control of his emotions. Throwing away his lightsaber, he declared himself a Jedi like his father before him, refusing the dark path Palpatine offered. Faced with this defiance, Palpatine revealed the full extent of his dark side power. Bolts of Force lightning erupted from his fingers, engulfing Luke in excruciating pain. As he tortured the young Jedi, Palpatine taunted that he would now witness the death of his friends before dying himself. What happened next shattered 2 decades of Sith dominance. Darth Vader, watching his son suffer, experienced an internal conflict that finally broke through his years of darkness. The man who had once been Anakin Skywalker re-emerged. Acting decisively, Vader lifted the Emperor and carried him to a nearby reactor shaft, throwing him down into the Death Star's core, despite being weakened by the Force lightning now directed at him. As Palpatine fell, he continued firing lightning upward in desperate fury. Upon hitting the reactor, his body exploded in a burst of blue energy that engulfed the throne room before dissipating. After more than 20 years of absolute rule, the Emperor appeared to be dead, his reign ended by the apprentice he had created and controlled for so long. In that moment, the prophecy of the Chosen One was fulfilled. Anakin Skywalker, through his final act of sacrifice, had brought balance to the Force by destroying both himself and his Sith master. The empire he and Palpatine had built began crumbling almost immediately. With the shield generator destroyed by rebel forces on Endor, the Death Star itself was soon targeted and destroyed. The seemingly invincible Imperial war machine suddenly appeared vulnerable across the galaxy. The news of the Emperor's death spread rapidly, though Imperial authorities attempted to suppress it. In sectors like Anoat, Imperial propaganda claimed the attack on the second Death Star had failed completely. Other Imperial messages contradicted each other, with some suggesting Palpatine had miraculously escaped, while others absurdly claimed he continued to rule from beyond the grave. The loss of both Palpatine and Vader, along with the second Death Star and numerous Star Destroyers, created a power vacuum at the heart of the Empire. Various military leaders and Moffs scrambled to maintain control of their territories without central leadership. For most beings across the galaxy, it appeared the long nightmare of Sith rule had finally ended. The rebellion, reorganizing as the New Republic, began the enormous task of restoring democracy. But in the shadows of the unknown regions, something stirred. Plans set in motion decades earlier began to activate automatically. The contingency, Palpatine's insurance against his own death, commenced with loyal Imperial officers receiving posthumous messages from their Emperor. Despite appearances, Darth Sidious had prepared extensively for this possibility. The destruction of his physical form on the Death Star would prove to be merely another transition in his long journey toward ultimate power. Death comes for everyone eventually, except when it doesn't. As Darth Vader hurled Emperor Palpatine down the reactor shaft of the second Death Star, the Sith Lord had little time to contemplate his apprentice's betrayal. But even in those final moments, Palpatine had prepared for this possibility. While his body plummeted towards certain destruction, his consciousness was already racing across the stars toward salvation. The secret Palpatine had stolen from his master Darth Plagueis finally proved its worth. Using his immense power in the dark side of the Force, Palpatine transferred his spirit to a waiting vessel on the hidden Sith world of Exegol in the unknown regions. His body on the Death Star was obliterated in the reactor explosion, but his essence survived the journey, taking its first breath in a new form created through Clone Wars-era technology. This resurrection came with terrible costs. The cloned body that received his consciousness was flawed, unable to contain the full power of the dark side that was Palpatine's essence. Almost immediately, the vessel began to decay. His new form became a ghoulish, undead approximation of his former self, with missing appendages and eyes clouded by cataracts. The damage was so severe that Palpatine could not move under his own power. To provide mobility, he was fitted with an Omen harness, a mechanical spine once worn by an ancient Sith king named Omen. Even with this support, his body's deterioration could only be slowed, not stopped, through the constant application of restorative fluids. Despite these limitations, Palpatine's mind remained sharp, perhaps even more focused than before. From his exile on Exegol, he began implementing the contingency. Operation Cinder, a component of this plan, targeted numerous loyal Imperial worlds for destruction. Weather satellites deployed above planets like Naboo, Vardos, and Comenor created devastating electrical storms that ravaged their surfaces. These attacks served multiple purposes, eliminating evidence of Palpatine's secret projects while also punishing the Empire for failing to protect its Emperor. The contingency also directed chosen Imperial remnants toward the unknown regions, guided by secret hyperspace coordinates Palpatine had spent years collecting. Through loyal agents like Gallius Rax, Imperial ships and resources were funneled along hidden routes mapped by automated probes Palpatine had dispatched during his reign. These forces would eventually form the nucleus of the First Order, a military junta positioned as the successor to the Empire. But the First Order represented only one aspect of Palpatine's posthumous influence. On Exegol, surrounded by Sith eternal cultists who venerated the ancient Sith traditions, Palpatine focused on creating the infrastructure of a true Sith empire. Massive automated shipyards constructed a vast armada of star destroyers, each equipped with planet-killing weapons. Children were raised in secret military camps, indoctrinated in Sith ideology, and trained to become fanatically loyal soldiers through techniques derived from clone trooper flash imprinting. Sith loyalists infiltrated the executive boards of corporations like Quatentrala Engineering and Cienard Jameis Fleet Systems, funneling critical resources to Exegol through subsidiary companies. Central to Palpatine's resurrection strategy was the creation of Snoke, a being genetically engineered through Sith eternal experiments. Like the Emperor's cloned body, Snoke originated from attempts to produce a vessel worthy of housing Palpatine's spirit. Though Force-sensitive, Snoke's form proved unsuitable for this purpose. Instead, Palpatine found another use for him as a proxy ruler over the First Order. Through manipulating Snoke, Palpatine gathered the forces that would form the First Order's military, ensuring the faction would ultimately serve his designs. Snoke rose to become supreme leader, guiding the First Order's development into a technologically superior war machine that surpassed the Empire's military capabilities. Under his leadership, the First Order expanded its influence in the unknown regions and began encroaching on New Republic territory. All the while, none in the First Order suspected Snoke's true origins, or that their ultimate purpose was to serve Palpatine's return to power. Even high-ranking officers like Enric Pride, who suspected Snoke might be subservient to some greater power, could not guess the truth. While building his proxy empire, Palpatine identified a more personal target for his machinations. Ben Solo, grandson of Anakin Skywalker, through his mother, Leia Organa, showed prodigious strength in the Force inherited from his family bloodline. Palpatine viewed him as a worthy successor to the Skywalker legacy and a potential vessel for Sith power. Through the Force, he watched over Solo throughout his life, using telepathy to communicate with him as various dark voices. These whispers told Ben secrets and provided warnings, comforting and guiding him, while also deceiving him with false promises that he could not survive without this mysterious help. The voices played on Solo's insecurities and used his fears against him, creating doubt about his family's intentions and his place in the galaxy. Simultaneously, Palpatine used Snoke as another channel to influence Solo, cultivating a friendship with the boy while manipulating him with deceit. The combined pressure from these influences drove Ben Solo toward the dark side, particularly after he discovered his grandfather had been Darth Vader, a truth his family had kept from him. When Luke Skywalker, sensing his nephew's growing darkness, momentarily considered killing him in his sleep, Ben saw no choice but to destroy the Jedi Temple and flee. Under Snoke's guidance, he took the name Kylo Ren and became master of the Knights of Ren, a group of dark side warriors. To ensure Ren remained committed to the dark side, Palpatine communicated with him from afar, impersonating the spirit of Darth Vader. These false communications reinforced Ren's devotion to his grandfather's legacy while concealing Vader's final redemption. Through these manipulations, Palpatine cultivated a powerful dark side user who would eventually become supreme leader of the First Order after killing Snoke, an outcome Palpatine had anticipated and even desired as a final test of Ren's worthiness. While cultivating Kylo Ren as a potential heir to Sith power, Palpatine made a surprising discovery. The Strand caste he had previously rejected, a son created through genetic engineering who lacked Force sensitivity, had escaped Exegol and built a life away from his father's influence. More significantly, this son had produced a daughter named Rey, who exhibited extraordinary Force potential. Born in 15 ABY, Rey represented something Palpatine had not anticipated but immediately recognized as valuable, an ideal vessel to contain his spirit and the power of the Sith. Unlike Ben Solo, who required careful manipulation due to his existing connections and training, Rey could be molded from a much younger age. Palpatine dispatched Ochi of Bestoon, a Sith cultist and assassin, to locate and retrieve Rey from her parents. The mission nearly succeeded in 21 ABY, when Ochi tracked the family to Jakku, where Rey's parents had been living as junk traders to maintain their anonymity. Sensing the danger to their daughter, Rey's parents made the desperate decision to hide her with local junk boss Unkar Plutt before fleeing the planet aboard Ochi's ship, the Bestoon Legacy. Their plan was to lead the assassin away from Rey, sacrificing themselves if necessary to protect their child. When Ochi caught up with them and they refused to reveal Rey's location, he killed them both on Palpatine's orders. Despite the parents' deaths, their sacrifice accomplished its purpose. Rey remained hidden on Jakku, growing up as a scavenger under Plutt's harsh guardianship, unaware of her heritage or the dark legacy that hunted her. She would remain there for 13 years, until 34 ABY, when events set in motion by the search for Luke Skywalker would draw her into the galactic conflict between the First Order and the Resistance. As these plans unfolded, Palpatine continued his physical existence in a state of half-life, neither truly alive nor fully dead. On Exegol, his decaying body hung suspended from the mechanical harness, surrounded by medical equipment and tended by loyal cultists. The dark side energies of the planet helped sustain him, but even these were insufficient to halt his body's deterioration completely. His condition forced him to remain on Exegol, unable to leave the planet and directly influence events. Despite these limitations, Palpatine's patience remained his greatest strength. Having already waited decades for his revenge against the Jedi, he was prepared to wait years more for the right moment to reveal his survival to the galaxy. Through Snoke, through the First Order, through whispers to Ben Solo, and through agents hunting for Rey, his influence spread like tendrils through the shadows, manipulating events toward his ultimate goal of resurrection and dominion. The galaxy at large remained completely unaware of these machinations. The New Republic, established in the wake of the Empire's apparent defeat, never suspected that the architect of their greatest oppression continued to exist in any form. Luke Skywalker's attempt to restore the Jedi Order proceeded without knowledge that their ancient enemy plotted against them from the shadows. Even those closest to the truth, like Leia Organa, who sensed dark influences affecting her son, could not trace the corruption to its true source. While the New Republic celebrated their victory and worked to restore democratic governance to the galaxy, while Luke trained a new generation of Jedi, while Han and Leia raised their son, Palpatine waited in the darkness of Exegol. Surrounded by ancient Sith statues and machinery of his own design, sustained by dark science and Sith sorcery, the former Emperor plotted his return to power, his revenge against the Skywalker family, and his final victory over the light side of the Force. The apparent death of Emperor Palpatine above Endor had not been an ending, but merely a transition, another step in the grand design of the most powerful Sith Lord in galactic history. Death itself had proven insufficient to stop Darth Sidious. The question remaining was what power in the galaxy, if any, could finally bring an end to his malevolent influence and prevent his return to dominance. Some threats never truly die. In 35 ABY, the galaxy received a chilling message broadcast across every channel and communication system. A voice long thought, silenced forever, echoed through space once more, promising revenge. Emperor Palpatine somehow had returned. The phantom broadcast sent shockwaves through a galaxy still recovering from decades of conflict. For Supreme Leader Kylo Ren, heir to Darth Vader's legacy and current ruler of the First Order, the message represented both threat and opportunity. Determined to eliminate any challenge to his authority, Ren began a relentless search for the source of the transmission, a quest that led him to the forgotten Sith world of Exegol. Using a Sith wayfinder recovered from Mustafar, Kylo Ren navigated the treacherous route to Exegol, a journey few had ever completed. What he found there defied all expectations. Deep within a massive Sith citadel sat the decrepit form of Emperor Palpatine, suspended by machinery, his body a decaying shell that barely contained the dark power within. When Ren threatened this withered figure with death, Palpatine simply laughed, reminding him that he had already died before, and that the dark side was a pathway to many abilities, some considered unnatural. The revelations continued as Palpatine admitted to creating Snoke, showing Ren multiple clone tanks containing identical copies of the former Supreme Leader. Each word from the Emperor unraveled more of what Ren believed to be true. The voice of Darth Vader that had guided him for years had been Palpatine all along, manipulating him from the shadows, playing on his insecurities, and pushing him toward darkness. Before Ren could fully process these truths, Palpatine revealed something even more astonishing. Above them, massive star destroyers began rising from beneath Exegol's surface, hundreds of vessels unlike any the galaxy had seen before. This was the Final Order, a fleet built in secret by the Sith eternal cultists. Each ship carried a planet-killing weapon capable of destroying worlds, just as the Death Star had once obliterated Alderaan. Palpatine offered this fleet to Kylo Ren, along with the title of Emperor, but with one condition. He must kill Rey, the last Jedi, who Palpatine revealed was his granddaughter. The connection between Rey and Palpatine explained her natural strength in the Force, but raised more questions than it answered. How could the Emperor, presumed dead for decades, have a granddaughter? The truth was as twisted as Palpatine himself. During his reign as Emperor, Palpatine had experimented with cloning technology, attempting to create the perfect vessel for his consciousness. One such clone, while physically healthy, lacked Force sensitivity. Deeming this Strandcast a failure, Palpatine allowed him to live but rejected him as unworthy of his legacy. This cast-off son eventually met a woman, fell in love, and had a daughter, Rey, who inherited her grandfather's tremendous power in the Force. Rather than kill Rey as ordered, Kylo Ren saw a different path forward. He would bring Rey to Exegol, but instead of eliminating her, they would overthrow Palpatine together and rule as Emperor and Empress. This plan reflected Darth Vader's offer to Luke Skywalker decades earlier, history repeating itself through a new generation. While Kylo Ren hunted for Rey, Palpatine moved forward with his contingency plans. He summoned Allegiant General Pride, a First Order officer who had secretly served Palpatine since the days of the Empire, and transferred command of the First Order military to him. As a demonstration of the Final Order's power, Palpatine ordered the destruction of Kijimi, obliterating the entire planet as a message to the galaxy. The Resistance, meanwhile, discovered the location of Exegol thanks to information left by Luke Skywalker. Rey, having learned of her heritage from Kylo Ren, decided to confront her grandfather despite her fear of turning to the dark side. Taking Luke's X-Wing starfighter and using the second Sith Wayfinder, she traveled to Exegol alone but transmitted her route to the Resistance, allowing them to follow. Upon arriving at the Sith Citadel, Rey found herself in a massive amphitheater filled with Sith eternal cultists. Suspended above them in his mechanical harness sat Palpatine, who welcomed his granddaughter as the heir to his Sith legacy. He revealed his true intention not to have Rey killed, but to have her strike him down in anger, so his spirit could pass into her body through an ancient Sith ritual. This would allow him to be reborn in a young, powerful vessel, while retaining all his knowledge and power. To drive Rey toward this dark choice, Palpatine showed her the Resistance fleet arriving above Exegol, then being decimated by the Final Order. With her friends dying and hope fading, Rey faced the terrible temptation of accepting Palpatine's offer to save them by taking his place on the throne of the Sith. Just as the situation seemed most dire, Ben Solo arrived on Exegol. Having renounced the dark side after a vision of his father and feeling the death of his mother, Leia, he came not as Kylo Ren but as a servant of the light, determined to help Rey. Sensing Ben's arrival, Rey stalled for time, hiding her awareness from Palpatine. When Ben finally reached the throne room, the two Force users stood together against Palpatine. The Emperor, realizing they would not turn on each other, discovered something he had not anticipated. Rey and Ben formed a dyad in the Force, an incredibly rare bond that made them two bodies, but one in the Force. Seeing an opportunity, Palpatine seized both of them with the Force and began draining their combined life energy. As their vital essence flowed into him, Palpatine underwent a terrifying transformation. His decayed fingers regenerated, his spine straightened, and his clouded eyes cleared. The life force of the dyad healed his clone body completely, restoring him to full power for the first time since his death on the second Death Star. Reinvigorated beyond measure, Palpatine discarded the mechanical harness that had supported him and stood on his own legs, declaring himself the all-powerful Emperor of the Sith. No longer needing either Rey or Ben, Palpatine callously hurled Ben Solo into a nearby pit, seemingly eliminating him from the conflict. Turning his attention to the battle raging above, Palpatine raised his hands toward the sky and unleashed a massive storm of Force lightning that disabled the entire Resistance fleet. Ships began falling from the sky, unable to maintain power under the onslaught of dark side energy. With victory seemingly assured, Palpatine turned back to Rey, who had been left weakened but alive by the life drain. As he prepared to finish her with a concentrated barrage of Force lightning, Rey heard the voices of Jedi past speaking to her through the Force. Luminaries including Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, Luke Skywalker, Qui-Gon Jinn, and many others encouraged her to rise and fight, lending her their strength in her moment of greatest need. Drawing on this connection to all the Jedi who had come before, Rey struggled to her feet. When Palpatine unleashed his deadly lightning attack, she defended herself with the lightsabers of Luke Skywalker and Leia Organa. As the Emperor intensified his assault, declaring himself to be all the Sith embodied, Rey responded by proclaiming herself as all the Jedi. In the culminating moment of the confrontation, Rey crossed the two lightsabers to better deflect Palpatine's lightning back at him. The dark energy rebounded upon its creator, disintegrating his restored body. Unlike his previous death, where his spirit had escaped, this time the destruction was complete. Both Palpatine's physical form and his spirit were obliterated, vaporized by his own power reflected back at him. The resulting explosion killed all the Sith eternal cultists in the throne room, bringing a definitive end to their cult. The effort of destroying Palpatine cost Rey her life, but not permanently. Ben Solo, having climbed from the pit where Palpatine had thrown him, found Rey's lifeless body and transferred his remaining life force into her, reviving her at the cost of his own life. As the last Skywalker faded into the Force, the bloodline that Palpatine had corrupted, manipulated, and attempted to destroy finally found peace. Above Exegol, the massive Sith fleet lost power following Palpatine's destruction. A spontaneous uprising across the galaxy, inspired by the Resistance's bravery, saw ordinary citizens joining the fight against the Final Order. Star destroyers fell from the skies over numerous worlds, including Bespin, Jakku, Endor, Corellia, and even Coruscant. Most significantly, the people of Naboo, Palpatine's homeworld, rose up against his forces, reclaiming their sovereignty from the specter of the Sith Lord who had used their trust to begin his rise to power decades earlier. In a final rejection of her dark heritage, Rey adopted the Skywalker name, honoring the family that had shown her love rather than the grandfather who had viewed her only as a vessel for his ambition. With this symbolic act, she declared that bloodlines need not determine destiny, that the dark legacy of the Sith could be overcome through choice and compassion. Palpatine's story, spanning more than 8 decades, encompassed the rise and fall of the Republic, the age of the Empire, and the struggle for a new democratic beginning. His machinations had shaped galactic history more than any other individual, bringing suffering to countless worlds. Through sheer determination and cunning, he had achieved what no Sith Lord before him had managed, destroying the Jedi Order and ruling the galaxy. Through forbidden knowledge and dark science, he had even cheated death itself. Yet in the end, Darth Sidious, the phantom menace who had haunted the galaxy for generations, was defeated not by superior power or greater cunning, but by the very things the Sith rejected: compassion, sacrifice, and the collective strength of those standing for light proved more powerful than all his dark side mastery and elaborate schemes. The Skywalker family, which he had manipulated for 3 generations, ultimately became the instrument of his final destruction. With Palpatine truly gone and the Sith eternal destroyed, the ancient line of Sith Lords that had persisted in secret since Darth Bane finally came to an end. The cycle of darkness that had threatened the galaxy for millennia was broken, allowing a new era to begin, free from the shadow of the most dangerous Sith Lord who had ever lived.